Welcome, everyone, and especially visitors, to this gathering hosted by the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bowling Green. Just a little housekeeping. Please, those that are here, set your cell phones to silent so that we may be present with each other. We are a welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, however you identify, wherever you come from, and whoever you love, you are welcome here. Our Sunday services are different each week so that we may honor and learn from our wide array of traditions and belief. Today, our speaker is our Minister Emeritus, Reverend Peter Connolly. And I'm been so looking forward to hearing from Peter again. And I will introduce him a little later. Although we walk our own path here in this place on the land of the Osage, the Cherokee, and the Shawnee, we journey together as one community. For Unitarian Universalists, the flaming chalice is a symbol of the light of learning and the love of our community. This morning, our chalice will be lit by Diane Lewis. As the congregation's chalice is lit, please light your own chalice at home, if you have one, and join in humming, "Rise Up, O Flame." This morning, our opening words will be presented by Delaire Rowe.
Strange and foolish walls. The years of all of us are short, our lives precarious. Is this one you all will read along? No? Okay. Our days and nights go hurrying on, and there is scarcely time to do the little that we might. Yet we find time for bitterness, for petty treason and evasion. What can we do to stretch our hearts enough to lose their littleness? Here are all of us, all upon this planet, bound together in a common destiny, living our lives between the briefness of the daylight and the dark. Kindred in this, each lighted by the same precarious, flickering flame of life. How does it happen that we are not kindred in all things else? How strange and foolish are these walls of separation that divide us. A. Powell Davies, who wrote.
We will now have a few moments for meditation, reflection, and prayer. The singing bowl will lead us into silence. After the silence, you're invited to join in the song Spirit of Life. The words will not be on the screen for those of us in the congregation, but they will be for those who are tuned in at home. Thank you, Florian. We have a responsive reading today on number 597, Love versus Hate. I will read the first line and then join the congregation in reading the italics. Never does hatred cease by hating in return. Only through love can hatred come to an end. Victory breeds hatred. The conquered dwell in sorrow and resentment. They who give up all thought of victory or defeat may be calm and live happily at peace. Let us overcome violence by gentleness. Let us overcome evil by good. Let us overcome the miserly by liberality. Let us overcome the liar by truth. I'm very pleased to introduce, to those of you maybe who have not met Peter Connolly, but he was our minister from 2009 to 2017. He was a former service coordinator at the Bay Cove Kit Clark Senior Services and a high school English teacher at Sacred Heart High School, and that was in Boston? Oh, Kingston, Massachusetts. He studied theology at Andover Newton Theological School and moved to Bowling Green from Boston, where he has lived ever since. He's a good friend and a great friend to all of us, and it's my pleasure to introduce or to have Peter speak to us, Reverend Peter Connolly.
Well, as my minister in Boston used to say when the weather would strictly limit attendance, good morning, faithful remnant. We have just about enough for our last supper, but we won't get into that. So I'm going to start with a few questions for you, but you don't have to raise your hand or answer out loud. You can just answer silently if you know the answer. Does pineapple belong on pizza? When you place the roll of toilet tissue on the roller, should it face the wall or the room? Are your taxes too high? The questions are posed as choices. You must choose one or the other. Did you answer yes or no that pineapple belongs on pizza? Do you have a definitive answer as to which direction the toilet tissue roll should face? Do you know for a fact that your taxes are too high or not? All these questions are posed as if there is a correct factual answer, and all of these questions have, in my opinion, the same answer. It depends. Does pineapple belong on pizza? It depends. Do you like pineapple on pizza? If so, it belongs there. If not, it does not belong there. It's a question of taste, not a question of fact. Now, you might find yourself saying, of course I know that. Everybody knows that. To which I respond, oh, really? Have you been on the internet lately? The great toilet tissue roll debate has been going on for years. Someone has tracked down the drawing which accompanied the application for a patent to prove that the roll should always face the wall. People argued the fact that the design on the printed rolls face a certain direction proves that the toilet tissue roll should face in a certain direction. The fact is that however you prefer to place the toilet tissue roll is the right way, because the answer is based on preference, not on fact. The answer to whether your taxes are too high is based on your assessment of your value for that investment. And that assessment is based on a number of things, such as whether you believe that you personally must benefit from the way the tax money is spent, or, if it's all right with you, that the community in general benefits. And whether you believe that that money is being spent efficiently. And whether you believe that graft in the system delegitimizes the collection of taxes. All of those concerns have to be investigated, and the results have to be based on fact in order to have value. When a friend of mine applied for college admission many years ago, he had to submit a persuasive essay in his application packet. The teacher he brought to help assess the effectiveness of the essay objected to the fact that Rick had included in his opening paragraph, "in my opinion." The teacher said, "You don't need to say that. They'll know that you're expressing your opinion." However true that may have been 50 years ago, and I'm not at all sure it was true even then, it's certainly not true now. "In my opinion" is an essential phrase in any online discussion in which we are expressing an opinion. In my opinion. A 2015 article in the Irish Times is helpful in understanding why arguments occur with such regularity on the internet and why they so quickly spiral out of control. The author, Patrick Frayne, states that on top of actual ideological disagreements, cyberspace abounds with misunderstandings and perceived slights. Psychologist John Suhler, who's considered the father of cyber psychology, says that this is a result of online disinhibition. When you cannot see or hear the other person, the lack of visual or auditory clues tends to make people more bold in what they say. He says you can't see a frown on someone's face or hear anger in that person's voice, which would otherwise cause you to tone down your argument. The arguer even forgets that another real, alive person exists on the other end of his or her words. Fortunately, there is a solution to this dilemma. We can remind ourselves that yes, there is another person at the end of this exchange, a person with their own life history, family background, social conditioning, and personality, and potentially personality disorder. The truth behooves us to respond with respect. This is a lesson some of us learned when we read together Karen Armstrong's book, 12 Steps to a More Compassionate Life, several years ago. The first step is to ask ourselves, is it an opinion or a fact that this person is expressing? And is the person making it clear which one it is? Instead of arguing with our own arsenal of weapons, we can ask a question. I wonder what it is that makes you say that. Or, I respect your opinion, but I'd appreciate knowing your sources. Can you help me out with that? Responses such as, sources please, are too abrupt. You might think you're issuing a respectful challenge, but I would remind you that even if you are telling yourself that there's a living, breathing human being at the other end of the exchange, that person is not necessarily doing that imaginative work to remind themselves that you are a human being on the other end of the exchange. A greater rather than a lesser amount of effort is necessary to establish the grounds for a fruitful exchange. Remember what we were taught in junior high? At least I was taught in junior high. Assume is spelled A-S-S-U-M-E. And when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Pretty silly, right? And yet, we make assumptions all the time. We have to, in order to put one foot in front of the other. We assume that the ground will not give way under us when we take our next step. And if you've ever twisted an ankle, you know that even that assumption is not true 100% of the time. But there's a difference between an assumption that's reasonable and grounded in fact and experience, and an assumption that's based strictly on opinion. In healthy, productive communication, it's always useful to question our assumptions. If you're in a healthy conversation with a good friend, you may count on that friend calling you out in a respectful way if you make a questionable assumption. But it's best to check our own speech before we utter a word or type a syllable, to question our own assumptions. In the same Irish Times article I mentioned earlier, Professor Suler shares these further insights. There are a number of points to note about arguing on the internet. People don't argue for straightforward reasons. They aren't necessarily trying to convince the person they're arguing with to change their minds, though that's sometimes the case. Sometimes they're trying to correct a narrative or right a perceived wrong for a silent audience. And this audience is potentially vast, but in actuality is often tiny. And sometimes they're not interested in changing anyone's mind at all, but are engaged in a performance for the like-minded. It's important to keep this in mind before allowing yourself to get drawn into an internet argument laden with pitfalls or landmines, to use a more vivid and potentially more accurate metaphor. This calls to mind the lesson that many of us learned from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. There is a space between stimulus and response, and that space is a gift. It is ours to use wisely if we remember to slow down our responses and claim that space as our own. We would be naive to refuse to recognize that there's such a thing as an internet troll. This is someone who takes perverse pleasure in stirring up trouble, stirring up emotional responses that move from rational to irrational with the speed of a slap on the Jerry Springer show. Such trolls are in a special category, which I'll discuss in a minute, but for now, let's put them aside and focus on the generic internet user, who may be you or me. And though I'm focusing on online communication primarily, most of what you'll hear today can just as easily be applied to so-called real-world communication. And I don't even want to get into augmented reality. In a 2018 article in Psychology Today, Jeffrey Smith says that in a disagreement, we all tend to want to get to the bottom line, the solution that will resolve the conflict. He goes on to say this is exactly the wrong thing to focus on, at least at first. Why do people say the things they do? What's their motivation? That's the question we need to begin with. If we don't know, we're only guessing, and we're bound to get in trouble. And we're always guessing. Even with our best friends, we're guessing because we can't climb into their heads and hearts. But with our friends, we have the benefit of learning from experience. So our guesses about their motivations are informed guesses. We know from a shared personal history the other person's preferences, personality type, field of expertise, general knowledge, and specialized knowledge. We know, in short, where they're coming from. In an internet exchange, we can very easily find ourselves arguing with strangers. A strange thing to do when you think of it. But it seems perfectly reasonable when your emotions have been charged up by a remark that you believe to be wrong-headed, or stupid, or idiotic. You get the idea. If, as Dr. Smith says, the cause of arguments and fights is a lack of mutual empathic understanding, the challenge is to find a way to connect with empathy. As he observes, when empathy is not engaged, then people revert to a self-protective mode and become judgmental. The result is bad feeling on both sides and no happy ending. If the way you interact with another person causes that person to revert to a self-protective mode and become judgmental, your communication has not been successful. Here is where you may be able to see the significance of today's talk, the title of today's talk. Respect is kindness. Your willingness to put yourself in the shoes of the other, to attempt to see the world, or at least this particular issue, from their perspective, is an act of kindness. You're willing to take the effort necessary to leave your own self-protective mode of being, and for a few moments, assume the perspective of another. An act of respect, an act of kindness. In the bond of empathy that is created, however temporary and however fragile, there is a space for real, genuine human communication. And there's no guarantee even then that it will occur, but the space for it to happen has been created. What if we start out with the presumption that the other person is acting in good faith? If they are, they want, as Dr. Smith says in the article, to be understood. You want to be understood. They want to be understood. In this scenario, you set the bottom line aside and focus on gaining a thorough understanding of the other person's feelings. As Daniel Kahneman has taught us in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, we tend to respond first with our feelings, and only afterwards with our reason, our intellect. If that's the case, we need to focus on understanding the feelings rather than the thoughts of the other person before we can reach an understanding. We might continue to disagree, but we can do so without being disagreeable because we have reached an empathic understanding, or at least we've tried. Just trying sends a message to the other party that you respect them, that you're trying to understand them, that you care. So much violence and disagreeableness comes from people feeling that they are not cared about, and that at least you can offer. So, what about internet trolls? Dr. Suhler, who I mentioned earlier, describes these folks as having oppositional, passive-aggressive, narcissistic, paranoid, and sociopathic personality types. They just want to argue, to hurt, to cause trouble, to pump up their self-esteem with inflated opinions. In other words, they are persons you cannot profit from engaging with. You will not be able to find common ground because persons with this personality type are not looking for common ground. Are they looking to be understood? Certainly, you can understand that we all want to be understood. You can argue that we all want to be understood. But unless such persons seek the professional assistance they need in order to overcome their oppositional style, your well-meaning attempts at communication will not only be unsuccessful, but you can cause long-lasting damage to yourself due to the trauma that may be inflicted. So, even so, there are a couple of caveats. First, how do you recognize someone as a troll without attempting to engage in a productive way? Often you can't. So you proceed with caution. You put self-care as your highest priority, or you don't proceed at all. Second, I find the word troll troublesome in the same way that I've learned to find the word slave troublesome. Both are labels that lock a person's identity in a box as if there's no other dimension to their humanity. Instead of slave, I now use the term enslaved person. Erica Brady taught me that at a discussion period right here in this sanctuary. It describes the person's condition, not their identity. Instead of troll, I prefer to say someone with destructive personality characteristics. Of course, troll is useful for shorthand, but since convenient labeling of people as socialist and un-American and psychopath is one of the things causing our destructive social divisions, we should be careful how we use it. So, what are a few takeaways from today's presentation? I can give you 6. Most people can only remember 3. So choose which 3 are the most important to you. Opinions are not facts. Be quick in clarifying whether a statement is one or the other. Seek understanding by asking questions, not issuing challenges or making statements. Feelings come first. Try to meet people at the level of what they are feeling in order to gain enough understanding to communicate fruitfully. Learn how to respectfully disagree and move on. Learn to identify trolling behavior and refuse to be ensnared by those who seek to demean you. Be so respectful as to be kind. You'll feel better about yourself as well as the other person. Namaste.
Thank you, Reverend Connolly.
You're welcome.
I look forward to being reminded to be a better person and how to look at things in a much more objective manner. As part of our responsible search for truth and meaning, we encourage thoughtful discourse. After the service, you're invited to join in discussion via Zoom or here at church, possibly in the library would be a good place if we have anything else you would like to discuss about Peter's sermon. We're going to move into the offertory at this point. This congregation and the work we do is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who contribute. The offering is a sacrament of the Free Church. You may place your donation in the plate beside the door on the way out, or use the QR code on the screen, or donate via our website. Today, now due to weather disruptions, we're not going to have the guest at your table donations. They will be taken through the month of January. So hopefully next time, if you can bring your little box for a guest at your table. And this is our third Sunday. So we wanted to give to the tornado relief. But to whom? Millions have been donated to Kentucky Strong, the Red Cross, United Way, the Salvation Army, etc. So we specifically wanted to help those here in our own church community with this particular donation. We're calling it a board discretionary tornado relief. Please give as you are willing and able. Several of our members are still suffering and facing uncertainties. as to housing and food, etc. So that is where our third Sunday donation will be going. And please enjoy the offering music, and your offering will be received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. Thank you, Florian. We have some community news. I have two items that I want to bring to your attention. Yesterday, 5 UUs attended the Bowling Green Rally for Voting Rights. I would say there were about 100 people, and we had an attorney from UK speak to us about the new Voting Rights Act, and it was very informative. It is full of ideas. I understand that the Republican Party representatives will not even discuss this measure, this bill, which it makes it, again, very hard, as Peter pointed out, to have any kind of discussion or change when there is a refusal to communicate. But Aileen Arnold, Becky Davis, Diane Lewis, Lisa Dalporta, and I were there. And Teresa Ward, yeah. So, right, so that was, good. 6 of us were there. And I also want to give you a storm recovery update. Though our church escaped a direct hit from the December tornadoes, it has taken us a full month to correct the storm-related damage and get everything back up and running 100%. Our electricity was out for 4 days, and the internal internet system was down for 2 weeks. The control panel for our fire alarm burned out and was replaced, and elevator issues were resolved, and there were other minor problems with other electric panels, and those have all been corrected. Problems with 2 of our 4 furnaces were repaired this week, and the heating system is now functioning properly, which makes it very comfortable in here for the 20 of us that are here today. A tall oak with a 100-foot crown toppled into our parking lot and has been cleaned up as of yesterday. And we want to give many thanks to our UU groundskeepers, Brad Lear and his son Drake, for cutting and clearing as much of it as they could. A very special thanks to our community support group, BG Strong, who sent us 3 anonymous volunteers with a large tractor and other industrial strength equipment. And they succeeded in removing the bulk of the tree after 3 days of effort. It was a huge tree that we had. And I want to give a special thanks to Ken Kuhn, our chair of the Buildings and Grounds team, and Eleanor Markle, our office manager, for their efforts in managing the logistics and setting and keeping the many appointments that were needed to see all these repairs through to the end. So we had a really strong team there who was close by. Finally, please continue to keep in mind our several members whose lives and homes were upended by the storm and whose recovery continues. So that certainly ties into our offering. If you have any questions about Unitarian Universalism or about joining this congregation, please speak with a member of our membership team. Is there a membership team? Sharon and Aileen, okay, good. And you can email our board president, Christina Kruger, at president@uubgky.org. And as always, you can find more community news by reading the monthly newsletter and the weekly email updates. At the church, you can look at the bulletin boards, and our website and Facebook page are always available online. Well, let's have one more hymn and then a reading, closing words, before we disconnect with our congregation who is at home. So our closing hymn is "We Laugh, We Cry," number 354, and you can hopefully hum loudly or sing loudly through your masks. So we'll let Florian lead us with that. Delaire Rowe will be giving our final reading.
It matters what we believe. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Some beliefs are like shadows clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities. Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness. Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies. Other beliefs are bound in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blithe the growth of resourcefulness. Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with upward thrust of life. Sophia Lyon Foss.
We will now bid farewell to those who have joined us online. We hope you found this service meaningful, and we invite you to join us again. Be well and go in peace.